develop. These shouldn't take too long, but I think they're absolutely crucial for you. So I'm going to suggest that the best way to think about Aristotle's philosophy, his ethics, is to make the following formula. Excellence, being good, being the best person, is a matter of skillfulness. So for Aristotle, the question of what does it mean to be good, he's going to say, being good is a kind of skill. So let's begin there. Let's go with him for a minute and imagine that maybe this could make a little sense. Ethics, character, being good is a kind of skill. Well, let's look at what skills are. What could that mean? A skill. Think of someone you know with a skill. Very skillful person in this or that. What are we saying about a person when we say they are very skillful? We're not necessarily talking about this action or that action, right? When I say John is really good at basketball, got mad skills, I'm not talking about one shot that he made or even one game that he played, but I'm making a comment about his complete way of playing. The package of moves and abilities and actions that I've observed with him, I'm making a judgment, describing them together and saying he's very skillful, but only in this one area, right, in playing basketball. Again, Aristotle is going to say, if you want to live a good life, you want to be a person of character, model your life on the basketball player in certain ways. Not Dennis Rodman, probably, right? But model your life on the basketball player. Seek to become skillful in living in the ways that John sought to become skillful in basketball. Now, I've never done this before because it's silly and I'm just a philosopher sitting here talking, but I actually have some props, visual aids, right? This is a copy of a famous sculpture, 3D, right? Beautiful ballerina, the dancer. Imagine the skill it took to produce this, the original. Imagine the skill it took to produce the computers and the machines to reproduce this too. What are we saying? What are we talking about when we use the word skill to describe that, whether it's the basketball player or the artist? What's behind that word? Aristotle is going to say, in any human endeavor, now this should remind you a little bit of Plato talking about horse training or the Olympics, right? He's going to say, in every human endeavor, when you're a sculptor, you come to that field, right? You come to that career or that work, that hobby, with a certain way of doing it. When you get on the basketball court for the first time, you have a way of dribbling, you have a way of moving, you have a way of passing. There's a way that sort of defines your way, and it's usually completely awkward, right? and horrible your first time. So you come to any project like that, learning how to do something, with a very, very basic rudimentary set of skills that probably have very little to do with what you want to accomplish. And the goal, this gets back to the purpose again, the goal of any skill is to get better at it. Okay, so again, we've got better and worse, don't we? So if you're going to live your life, you want to live it better. If it's a skillful thing, you want to live it better. You don't want to live your life shooting air balls, right? Dribbling off your foot. Or, making a lump of ugly shape as opposed to this. You want to do it well. Okay. But beyond that, this skillfulness has a very specific kind of history, I was going to say, a trajectory to it. So not only do you want to be able to produce a beautiful jump shot and play a great game, not only do you want to be able to produce a beautiful statue, beyond that, when we say someone is skillful, and when the beginning sculptor begins her work and begins to work on this, one of her goals is that as she continues to practice this process, it will become easier. So hypothetically, you can imagine a brand new sculptor with no real skills, but just with an amazing amount of determination. On their very first try, if they just keep at it again and again and again and again, without a whole lot of skill, they could still maybe create something that's very beautiful. But it would be a hell of a lot of work, and very frustrating, and very painful. But imagine if they had been practicing for 10 years, working on this and that technique, and getting their hands to get used to the feel of the clay and understanding just by feel or by sight that clay needs a little more water, needs a little more silica, needs a little more whatever, right? 10 years of playing around with it, building crappy sculptures. And then they had gotten the same idea 10 years later, and then began to build this. It would have been much easier for them to build that. So just to, if I didn't confuse you enough, person A has no skills, and they get an idea in their head, and they work and work and work and work and work, and finally manage to make it what they wanted, and it's beautiful. Person B doesn't have that idea, but has been practicing for 10 years, and then gets that idea. It's going to be infinitely easier for them to produce that same sculpture because they have the practice. So we have a word for this, luckily, very common word, and it's second nature, right? When you develop a skill, you're not just trying to perform the skill well. You're trying to get to the point where it's not very difficult to perform it at all. It should be easier and easier. It should become part of how you move if you're a basketball player, how you touch and feel and shape if you're a sculptor, how you listen and hear and move, right? If you're a violin player, you start out with one of these, as every parent knows, it's horrifying for the first 6 months because it's all scratching and screeching and knocking, and right? So what does it mean to become skillful in this? You have an idea, there's a telos, and you say, I want to get better. I've heard other people play, I want to play like that, that's my goal. And that means two things. It means you want to do it better, and it means Your doing it should become easier. You should be better at doing it. And I think that's what we mean when we say both of those things, when we say someone has skill. We don't mean that they just happened to do something and it worked well. We mean, holy crap, look at that guy. He makes it look so easy, right? That's true skill. This is the model that Aristotle thinks we should follow in thinking about our lives. If we want to be good, if we want to be excellent, we have to develop skills, and that means do things better and practice them to the point where they're part of our nature, where we're not struggling. It's not painful, it's not a lot of effort to do what's right, to do what's good, to do what's excellent, because we've been practicing. So for me, this is a really, really interesting model for a couple of reasons. One is that it's a model of creativity, isn't it? It's a model that says your life is not just moment to moment, follow this rule, follow that rule. No, it doesn't really have any rules at all. It says your life is a work of art. Right? Your life is something that you are creating as you go. And if you want to create a thing of beauty, of skill, of excellence, it takes practice, it takes work. But that work is moving you in a direction. It's changing you. Your personality, how you see the world, how you feel about the world, how you move in the world, the way you feel about things is changed when you take up the skill of violin or when you take up the skill of being a good friend. Really not that much difference, Aristotle thinks. Those are both skills that over time, if you practice with an ideal of what's better, that's your goal. If you practice moving towards that goal, one day you wake up and it's kind of who you are. The other way I want to talk about this, I think for me it's been incredibly helpful when I hadn't read Aristotle until I was in graduate school, so I came to his thought pretty late, but I think it's one of the most interesting approaches to human life I've ever encountered. This is going to take us back to the narrative method that we discussed earlier in the semester, and it kind of dropped off a little bit. So if you think about our life as a skill or a set of skills, and you with that idea, you're no longer really asking the way Kant and Mill ask. You're no longer asking, if I get into a tough situation and I have to make a decision, what do I do? That's not what Aristotle is asking, right? So it's like a violin player worrying, if I get to a specific measure, or if I have to play a certain fingering, what am I going to do? What's the rule? That may be one thing they have to encounter in a piece of music, but the much, much bigger task of the violin player is to get the whole thing going. Not piece by little piece, but to see the music as a whole. And to tie in all the different things they're practicing to their entire repertoire and to their entire way of playing the violin. And this is why, artists, even bad ones, develop a style. And when you hear someone pick up a piece of music or listen to something on the radio, although I don't know if that applies too much to music on the radio, but you can usually recognize someone's style, which is again testimony to the fact that these arts are not about moment-to-moment decisions and choices, but a much longer trajectory of the habits that you develop over time. Okay, so sorry I went back to all that stuff. Let's get to character and story. So now we have a picture of the human life over time developing skillfully, hopefully, but developing towards a goal, a purpose, an excellence, and in order to get there you have to become skillful. This now parallels, I think you can see, the narrative understanding of human life and ethics that we talked about earlier, because like the skill notion, the story notion, the narrative notion says your life is long, not short. Your life has a depth that goes back many years and will go forward, hopefully, many years. That's what you're intending. And the meaning of your life now is tied up with where you've come from and where you're going. That's your story. So in that sense, it has the long arc of what we've just been talking about with the development of a skill. But beyond that, I think there's some really profound insights in this approach to Aristotle. So Aristotle would say that probably the first thing you need to recognize, if you're going to think about the meaning of your life and where all that meaning comes from and how it's framed, like how it originally sort of gets delivered to you, is the fact that you are born into stories, other people's stories. Your parents had everything in their lives was in motion. They already had a past. They had a future planned out for them. And you arrived in the middle. It does remind me of one of my favorite bumper stickers I ever saw. It said, drive carefully. 90% of all people are caused by accidents. So, maybe you weren't planned, but your parents had plans, and they had a past, and that was not a simple past. It was a very complicated past, because all human life is complicated. So, it related to their parents and their parents' expectations and how they were raised, and their family and their friends and their histories and good things and bad things that had happened to them, and politics and the wars and go on and on and on. And then you're born. For Aristotle, this is a fundamental fact. Aristotle said human beings are fundamentally social creatures, not individual, not isolated individuals, social creatures. So I think the best way to talk about this is to say that we're born into these stories and we live out our lives through these stories. Now we've already talked about this with the narrative method, so I don't want to repeat all that. But let me point to a couple connections that might surprise you, or at least I think they're kind of interesting. One is that we have this word that describes the human personality, character, right? The person has a certain kind of character that defines them, and that's a whole range of personality traits and other things that sort of form this bundle, right? This package of this person, and you can recognize their character in the way they do things. Now notice that same word, character, is also what we use to describe the individual in a story, right? So stories have characters, and people have or are characters. And I don't think that's an accident. I think it is true that we develop the character we are through playing out the characters that we've inherited. I became the kind of person I am today, in part, by being born into a family and playing the role of son to my parents, and then playing the role of big brother to my two younger sisters. See, those are roles I didn't choose. I was born into them. And they're not static roles. It's not like I'm born. A role isn't like, a box you were born in. It's not a place. It's something that takes place in a story. That's what a role is. It means that time is going on and you have to figure out, you have to get on the train or you're on the train. You have to figure out how to stay on the train. What do I do? Okay, I'm a son. What does that mean? Well, my parents had ideas about that, and that's what they taught me. I try to be a good son, and it makes me who I am. The character role that I played as son shaped the character that I am. Isn't that interesting? We are born into these roles. Student, doesn't that shape your character? The way that you learned to hold yourself and live in that school setting, to relate to your teachers and other students and coaches and principals and all of that whole world. That's a role you have to learn how to play. The way you played it shapes the person you are, your character. So let's tie these together then. What does that mean for ethics? Notice how I'll tie these together. For ethics, the question would be, well, what's a better son? Right? What's a better way to be a son? What's a better way to be a student? What's a better way to be big brother? So those are the roles I'm given. They're going to shape the person I am, my character. Well, Aristotle is going to say, just like the sculptor who comes to that lump of clay for the very first time, they recognize that there's going to be a better and worse way of molding that clay. And they might look at the teacher over there and see they've already got these skills and they do it better. I want to get there. So Aristotle is going to say the role of brother, the role of son, the role of lawyer, the role of nurse, the role of neighbor. Take your pick, fill in the blanks. All of these roles that we inherit, which are these moving trains we have to jump on and figure out, how do I stay on here? What's the game? What does it mean to be good, better, excellent? He's going to say all these roles come with some built-in expectations and built-in standards and ideas of better and worse, and more specifically, of excellence. So we encourage my daughter who plays this violin to listen to the best violin players in the world so that she has a picture, an image, a sense of where she wants to excel. She has a sense of excellence within the field of violin, and that inspires her and moves her and attracts her towards a goal, in a direction. In a role of student, there are better and worse ways of being a student, and some of the worst, what it means for it to be the worst way, or a worse way, is that you just don't end up doing it very well. Right? Last year I was a pretty good student, this year not so much. That actually has meaning, right? So these roles are very much like the skills, in that we all recognize that you can do it better and worse. And we all recognize that guy, he's Father of the Year. He plays that role fantastically, right? He's got mad skills. He's not dribbling the ball off his foot. He must have practiced. He must have thought about it. He must have worked at it. He's gotten really good at it. He's a natural. That's the picture Aristotle is painting. If you can become a natural at violin, a natural at... I brought another... we don't really need it, but I did bring my soccer ball. Not very well used, you can see. Right? The guy's a great soccer player. He's practiced. It makes it look so easy. That guy's a great father. He must have practiced. It makes it look so easy. Same idea. That we recognize excellence when we see it. We recognize failure when we see it. These roles that we play are not neutral. They're not just arbitrary roles. They mean something. They have a specific telos, Aristotle would say, a specific kind of excellence, which when someone achieves it, we recognize it as beautiful and wonderful and good. And this is ethics. Ethics is about moving slowly but surely towards the place where your life, the way you are, how you live, is easier and easier because you have oriented yourself towards excellence and practiced it, and now it's become second nature. It's who you are. Your character comes from working out and playing as excellent as you can the many character roles that you inherit, and some of which you choose. Of course, like your career, you're going to choose that. You don't inherit it. Nonetheless, as soon as you step into that nurse's uniform, get that first job, there's a whole lot of things you can do wrong. You can fail at. And if you're still struggling with the same things in 10 years that you're struggling with today, something ain't right. You should be developing skills. So, I'll stop there. This is Aristotle's picture of ethics. It's rich and artistic and creative and dynamic and very often frustrating for people who want to be told what the rules are. Aristotle doesn't really give you any rules. But he does give you a vision. And he doesn't even need to tell you what excellence is. He thinks you can find it. You'll see it if you look for it. And if you work at it hard enough, you can become excellent. You can become a good person, a person of character. See you next time.